Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us today, this afternoon. Today's webinar is on printed document templates in Sage Intacct. My name is Sarah Novak. I'm a marketing manager here at LBMC Technology Solutions. And real quickly, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. All the phone lines are muted to eliminate any background noise. If you should need anything throughout the presentation, please let me know during using the chat panel. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. Feel free to submit them anytime and we'll just get to them at the end of the presentation. But if you want to jot down a question so you don't forget, go ahead and submit it. This webinar is also eligible for CPE. So make sure in order to qualify for CPE, you must stay on for the entire session, and we'll be having some polling questions throughout the session. So make sure that you answer all of those in order to get your CPE credit. We'll also be recording this session and sending it out in a few days' time. So make sure and look out for that email. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Shay Simpson. Shay is with LBMC Technology Solutions, and she serves as our Sage Intacct consultant, and she has over 20 years experience in accounting, and she's really glad to be here today with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Shay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Well, thank you guys for joining this afternoon. I really appreciate this opportunity to present this hot topic to you guys. Printed document templates has kind of become my niche as one of the consultants here with LBMC. I really started working with them probably a little over a year ago and really started diving into them, getting a lot of tips and tricks and learning by failure as well. So I have learned a lot of good things about printed document templates that's hopefully going to make things a little bit easier on you. Maybe you can learn from some of my mistakes. Again, welcome today. We're going to be going through some learning objectives. I'm going to teach you the basics as far as installing the Sage Intacct printed document toolbar into Microsoft Word. I'm going to explain how printed document templates work, go through some best practices, and identify some good resources that are going to be available to you. Because what you're quickly going to discover is that working with the printed document templates, it's not so much a learning curve as in terms of Intacct, but it's really more of a learning curve in terms of Microsoft Word. So if you've not really worked with mail merge documents or anything of such, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to work with these printed document templates. But again, I'm going to give you some good resources and good tips to follow. So with that, let's go over some of our learning objectives for today. Again, we're going to understand where our printed document templates can be used in modules within Sage Intacct. We're going to understand what objects could be added to printed document templates because there are some limitations there. We're going to understand how our merge fields pull data from Intacct into Microsoft Word. We're going to learn to create a printed document template from a legacy document and also learn to create a custom printed document template from duplicating an existing Intacct template. Again, we're going to go over some of those tips and tricks as I stated before, and then we're going to learn to upload the printed document templates into Intacct, and then we're going to run some test prints. So I'm going to be going back and forth this afternoon between the PowerPoint presentation as well as working within Sage Intacct to kind of demonstrate quite a bit of this, because really it's very visual. All right, so if you've not installed the Sage Intacct printed document toolbar, you're going to go into whether your company subscriptions are either customization services or platform services. There's going to be a blue hyperlink at the top that states download the Sage Intacct printed document toolbar for Microsoft Word. You're going to save that as an exe file, and then you're going to open that file and follow the on-screen instructions. And then once that's installed, you're going to find that Intacct toolbar in the add-ins. I'm going to show you exactly within Sage Intacct where you're going to see that. So under, again, whether or not you have platform services or customization services, you come into your printed document templates. It's going to take you to this screen right here, and your hyperlink is going to be right up here at the top. So there's that exe file that it's going to open, and you're going to go through those installation guidelines. Once that is installed, it is then going to take you within Microsoft Word. You're now going to see up here under this add-ins, you're now going to see this Intacct. So again, it's going to be under your add-in Intacct. When you log in, it's going to pull up a login. You're going to put in your company ID, your user ID, and password. You won't necessarily have to worry about your client ID because for you guys, it's just going to be your company ID and your username and password. And this is going to be the same information like you're logging into Sage Intacct. So once you have downloaded that, excuse me, skipped one slide for me there. You're also going to have to authorize the toolbar sender ID within your Intacct environment. So you're going to go under Company and Setup, and under your configuration, under the Security tab, you're going to have to add that Web Services authorization. Your sender ID is going to be cdocs_v2, and in the description, you can put something similar to custom document. And again, I'm going to show you exactly within Intacct where you're going to go. So again, under your company information, and obviously always with this, it's whether or not your permissions within Intacct allows you to go to the company configuration. But once you go into your company configuration, you're going to go to the Security tab. You're going to come down, you're going to edit, you're going to click add. It's going to pull up a screen just like this, and you're going to enter in this criteria, cdocs_v2, and in the description you can put something similar to custom document. Once you're finished with that, you're going to save it. So now you're ready to run those printed document templates within Sage Intacct. All right, so it's time for our first polling question.
Hey everyone, so I've launched the first polling question, and that is, where can printed documents be used? This is a multiple selection answer, so you can choose one or as many as you think is the right answer. We're going to give you about 2 minutes for this question. If anybody has any issues with the polling question, please send me a chat. Okay, we've got about a minute left.
I feel like I need to be humming the Jeopardy theme song.
It's just do, 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 do.
I know, right?
Okay, Another 30 seconds. Looks like we've got most everybody completed. All right. Thank you, everyone. Shay, you can continue.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. So if you selected all 4 responses, you would be correct. So printed documents can be used within Accounts Receivable for our invoices and our AR statements. It can be used within order entry for our sales quotes, sales orders, shippers, and sales invoices. You are always going to have a little bit more flexibility, obviously, with order entry than you are Accounts Receivable. You're going to have a little bit more limitations with Accounts Receivable in terms of what information can be pulled in. Under purchasing, you can use it for purchase requests and purchase orders. And in inventory control, you can use it for transfers and adjustments. Now, obviously, due to time restraints, we're not going to have time to go through all of these. So mainly today, we're going to focus on order entry and being able to pull in a sales invoice. But any of the functionality that we learn today and apply today, we can use across any of these modules. All right, so looking at the big picture, these printed document templates are going to allow you to create a branded printable document from Sage Intacct. So it's not going to be just that generic invoice or statement that's not going to, in other words, look pretty. You're going to be able to design it to where it's going to have your company logo. It's going to have your any type of information that you want to supply to your customers. It's going to be able to have that available. So going through the cycle, we're going to be able to create a document template. Again, we're going to be uploading that to Intacct. We're going to assign it to a transaction or customer. And then obviously we're going to be testing that and then editing it if applicable, and then printing it or emailing our document. Now, oftentimes clients will ask me, so Shay, I set the default invoice template in order entry, but something else is trumping that. So this chart down here in the bottom left-hand corner is really good to show what overrides what. So anytime you go into print or email documents, you can override the printing. You can also set as the transaction default. So within our transaction definitions within order entry, we're going to be able to set that as the default. And then lastly, set at the customer or vendor default. So I'm going to kind of show you in terms of where you can set that. So again, we're going to go back into our Sage Intacct environment. And again, we're going to just focus on order entry right now. So within the order entry configuration, we're able to define the default templates here. So for our various types of transactions, we're able to default it here. We're also able to default it on the transaction definition. So within any transaction definition, we are also able to set the default under the print as well. So again, printed document templates, we're able to set that particular default within the transaction definition. And then lastly, we're also able to default it on the customer. So anytime that I come into a customer, I'm able to default it here as well. Again, so under my printed document templates, I'm also able to default it here as well. So there's multiple ways in Intacct to set those defaults, and just always be aware of which default trumps which one. So this is always a good slide to come back to and reference. All right, so what can be added to these document templates? Obviously, we're going to be looking a whole lot at the merge fields today. What that's going to do is that's going to pull that data in from Sage Intacct into the Microsoft Word template. We're going to be able to add static text. So obviously our headers and footers, any type of remittance information that you want to supply to your customers, company information, accounts receivable information, obviously hyperlinks. So if they need to go in and pay via a particular hyperlink or a hyperlink to possibly accounts payable, then we're able to put those in there as well. And also images, so the PNG, JPEG, and GIF. And this is one thing to note as well. Always within Intacct, there are limitations in terms of fonts. So obviously in Microsoft Word, there's multiple fonts that you can choose from, but within Sage Intacct, these are the only ones that Sage Intacct supports. So that's one thing that's good to notate. And with that, we are ready for our next polling question.
Okay, the second polling question's been launched. How can you locate field IDs? Again, you can choose multiple answers if you think that that's needed.
And just so you know, for these field IDs, these are going to be what's going to be pulling into these merge fields. So how are we going to determine what those field IDs are within Sage?
Okay, we have a little less than a minute left. All right, Shay, if you want to go ahead and continue or finish with that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. All right. So again, if you selected all three, you would be correct. So the first place we're going to look at is we're going to look at platform services, customization tools, and catalog. So within our Sage Intacct environment, we go to platform services, customization tools, and catalog. Of course, it's going to give me an error message. Let's try this one more time. Platform services, customization, and catalog. And it's still going to give me an error message. That is quite all right. All right, so we'll just go back into our PowerPoint presentation. But once you go in there, you're going to be able to see within the catalog, you're going to see multiple object names. So for example, this is under the sales document. Document type is an invoice. And what that is going to do is that's going to list all of our fields and what those fields are called. Sometimes it's going to give us a little bit more of a description. because sometimes obviously it's not going to be very intuitive as to what that field ID is. That will provide us with a little bit better description. Secondly, we're going to be able to go into the online help. So again, I'm going to demonstrate this within Intacct. So if we go into help and support, we go into that help center. Within our help center, under more, you're going to see customization and platform services. You're going to come down and be able to select the printed document template. Under our list of merge fields, we're going to be able to select those merged fields for printed document templates. What that's going to do is that's going to produce merge fields for printed document templates. So it's going to also give us those merge tables. Again, it's going to give us our merge fields that we have available. And lastly, anytime that you're within a document, you're going to be able to go to the transaction, and you're going to be able to look at the order entry or accounts receivable, the document XML. So again, we're going to look at that within Intacct. We're going to go into a sales invoice. Under more actions, we're going to view as XML. And the easiest way to do this, so if I was looking for, say I was looking for item ID. So I'm going to search for my item ID, so CM600. So I'm going to view as XML. Control F. So once I type in, so once I do Control F, I can search for something specific. That is the value. That's my field ID, entries underscore item ID. So if you know what you're looking for, you can easily find the field ID. All right. So any questions thus far, Sarah? Just want to make sure that we don't have anything that's not clear to someone.
We just had a question about downloads, but I think we could probably address that at the end. Nothing on this specifically.
Perfect. All right. So now we're going to look at creating a printed document template from a legacy. So obviously, a lot of times you have these invoices that are either in Microsoft Word or, for the most part, a lot of times they're PDFs that they're coming out of your legacy system. So whether that's QuickBooks, GP, what have you. So if you have a PDF version, and again, based on your version of Adobe Acrobat, once you open that document, you can export it to Microsoft Word, and just make sure that you save it as a 97 to 2003 document, because that's what Sage Intacct is going to support. So once you bring that into Microsoft Word, then you're going to be able to start manipulating it. I oftentimes, this is where I will start with my clients. I'll ask them to send me one of their legacy invoices. I will take it, I'll convert it to a Word document, and then I'm able to go in and start inserting those merge fields so that we can utilize it within Sage Intacct. You can also create a custom printed document from duplicating the ones that are already in Intacct. So again, we're going to look at that within the Intacct environment. So within Sage Intacct, under our platform services, under our printed document templates, notice that there are multiple printed document templates already out here that are already standard within Sage Intacct. So if I wanted to search on specifically the ones that are applicable to order entry, I can filter my list down. Notice that there's no edit functionality on any of these. So these cannot be edited as they are. But what you can do is you can export the template. You can open the template. Notice it's already going to have the bulk of your merge fields already in here, and you're going to be able to start manipulating this document and tailoring it to fit your needs. So obviously inserting your logo, inserting specific fields, and inserting specific verbiage that you want. Once you do that, then you're able to save this document. And this is going to be your template that you're going to be utilizing going forward. All right. So now, this is my favorite part, the tips and tricks. So this, again, I'm going to be teaching you guys today based on some of the things that I've learned over the last year, tips that have come from some of my fellow colleagues, and the tips and tricks that have come from Intacct. But again, these are extremely beneficial. So the first is in terms of when you're editing, you're going to be working with tables a lot within Microsoft Word. Tables are going to be your friend, because with the tables, you're going to be able to utilize alignment better. You're going to be able to utilize your headers, and you're going to be able to see that layout a lot clearer than just working with a standardized Microsoft Word document. So one thing you're going to do is you're going to want to show your grid lines. So now let's look within Microsoft Word. And under Layout, I'm going to want to view these grid lines. Now notice when I turn that off. If I turn it off, if I have tables within this document, I can't intuitively see them unless they have borders around them. But if I turn on my grid lines, it's going to show me that this is actually a table. This entire section is actually a table. This entire section up here is actually a table. So this is a really good function in terms of Microsoft Word to keep those grid lines turned on. It's going to save you a lot of headache. Another tip, turn on that show hide to assist with formatting. And this is one that I discovered myself that really kind of helped me. So that is your show hide functionality here. It's going to show the paragraph marks and other hidden formatting symbols. So notice now, once I turn that on, I am able to see anytime, obviously, that I've hit return, or anytime that where I have the different paragraphs. I have spaces here. It's going to clearly show me where my spaces are so I can get that alignment the way that I want it within my document. Another tip, and I just gave away the last polling question. That would be our polling question. I'm going to let you go ahead and do go ahead and create that polling question, Sarah, but
Oh, sure.
obviously,
Everyone, the third polling question is open. Hopefully everyone will get this right.
exactly. So this is where we're going to really start delving into this. That do you know the difference between your header fields and your transaction line fields? This is going to be something that's going to be extremely beneficial when we look at building these.
And this is a pretty simple question if you want to keep going, Shay.
Absolutely. All right. So again, do you know your difference between your header fields and your transaction line fields? The header section, whether it's in an invoice within Accounts Receivable or within order entry, is going to be all of your information at the top of the invoice section. So it's not going to have any information that is associated with a line number. So this is going to be obviously your dates, your customer information, terms, due dates, bill to and ship to information. That is all going to be found within the header portion of those invoices. Now, the line item details or the transaction fields, that is going to be associated with down in the entry section. So again, these entries that are associated with these line numbers. So again, that's going to really come into play when we start building out these invoices to know the difference between those two. So when I stated that as far as knowing the difference between the header section and the entry section, each time that we create a table, so if we're creating a table for our headers or for our entries, you always have to put a table start and a table end. And you say, well, Shay, how do I necessarily know how to pull that in? Well, if you are working with one of the standardized documents that is within Intacct, so if I export one of their templates and just start modifying it, it's already got my table start and my table end. And that's going to tell Word, this is the table start and end for my entries. So all of this information is coming from the entry portion of my invoice. Function keys. So if you'll notice within my Microsoft Word document, notice that you can see all of my merge fields. So you can see that this is the location ID, location entity. You can see all of the information within the merge fields. Well, oftentimes, if you open up Microsoft Word, this is what you're going to see. All you're going to see is bill to print as, bill to mailing address. You don't see the full functionality of those merged fields. So Alt F9 is going to open that back up. And once you start working within Microsoft Word and start creating some of these invoices, most of the time your Alt F9 is always going to be turned on. But just know that Alt F9 is going to, again, open up those merged fields. Again, F11 is going to move that cursor to the next merged field. Shift F11 is going to move the cursor to the previous merged field. So again, these function keys are going to allow you to work within Microsoft Word a little bit easier. All right, so a lot of times we're having to correct page break issues. I see this a lot. So you're going to be able to edit your table properties to allow the row break across pages, as well as repeat the header at the top of each page. Again, you're going to have your table start and your table end declarations. Again, all of your line item detail is going to be on a single line item within this row of the table. Any type of subtotals, we're going to put in a separate row or separate table. And this was one up here in the upper right-hand corner. This was one that really started helping me out that I wasn't even aware of, is that if you hit Shift Enter, it doesn't put a complete space between the next line. It's almost probably about half. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Get back out to Microsoft Word. All right. So notice here, if you look at this little paragraph identifier, that is a complete space. So what I have done is I've hit Enter. Okay. Now, if I don't want nearly as much space between the top bill to and ship to and the bottom portion of my items or descriptions, if I hit Shift and Enter, notice now it just presents this little return. Now, I use it primarily when I'm putting in an address because it just looks a little bit cleaner. So if I put in the customer name, I will hit Shift Enter before I start putting in the address information. Again, Shift Enter before I put in the city, state, and zip. And what that does is, again, it just makes it a little bit cleaner and makes that data just a little bit tighter together. It just looks good visually. All right, we can also format our numbers. So very similar to with how we're doing formatting, obviously within Excel, within Microsoft Word, we actually have to put in this formatting in terms of if we want to put it as a $ with commas and decimal places. Same thing too with dates. We're wanting to format that date. So after our merge fields, we're putting in that backslash and we're putting in what we want that formatting to be of our numbers. So again, you're going to be able to format those numbers within Microsoft Word. We can add column totals. I've not had a lot of clients necessarily use this, but it is a good functionality that if we want to sum all of the information here, sum all of the information in our amounts column, we can do so. Now, obviously, we are also going to have a subtotal section at the bottom. So that's why I say generally, I usually don't see a lot of my clients that necessarily use this functionality, but you can sum the information above. So one of my favorite functionalities within these invoices is to add if-then statements, and I use this quite frequently. So one thing that I like to do is for my entries, if there is a $0 amount, you can put in an if-then criteria that we don't want it to display. And I know you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is a massive formula that I have no earthly idea of what it means. Well, the beauty of these slides is that you can copy this formula and put it into your line items because it is very difficult to write these if-then formulas. So again, it's saying if the merge field entry's value is 0, we don't want it to print anything. But if there is a value in there, we want it to print the merge field's entry value, and we've also formatted as a dollar amount. You can also put in if-then statements within custom headers or custom footers. Now, this was one that I created for a client that they had multiple locations. We created a custom field within the header section of order entry within the invoices. And for their locations, they had separate phone numbers for each location. So obviously, if someone had questions in regards to those invoices, they needed them to contact the correct location. So this was a custom if-then that we built and put in the footer that said, if it's location 123, call this number. If it's location, obviously these are the locations, 3, 4. They actually had, I think, total, I think when all was said and done, I think we had 15. But we were able to easily correct this to where they didn't have to go in and start manipulating the document. This is another favorite one of mine. So obviously a lot of within your company, you may have multiple logos for your different legal entities. So we are able to put in an if-then statement that says, if it is legal entity 100, we want it to print this logo. If it's legal entity 200, this logo. Legal entity 300, this logo. Now, the only caveat to that is that when you are within Sage Intacct, you're going to want to transact at the entity level. Because if you don't, it could potentially, it's not going to work. So let's go back into So in this instance, we are transacting. Let me get that out of the way. Come on, go out of my way there. There we go. So we are transacting at the entity level within our demo environment. So what I have done is I have come out here and I've actually created invoices within legal entity 20, 30, and 40 so that I could show you what this is going to look like once we start demoing this. So this is another really good, useful tip. You can also put in if-then statements for paid status. So a lot of times if we send out an invoice and it may be maybe an invoice, it may be a statement, and we want to know that this one has been paid. We are actually able to put in the word paid, and we can also even put in an image. And I have multiple clients that have used this functionality as well. We can also put in aging at the bottom of an invoice, which is really nice. So if we want to supply an invoice as well as an aging for that customer, we're able to do so. All right, so now let's really start getting into the nuts and bolts of what this is going to look like within these environments. So we're going to look at our sample invoice. So again, what I ended up doing was I took this sales invoice directly out of Intacct, and I started manipulating it for my demo company. So I added my logos. So here is my if-then for my logos. So if I'm transacting at entity 40, 30, or 20, I added in a table. And one thing that I do like to do is that even though I have information to the right, I still put in a full table so I can make sure that my alignment is correct. So in this instance, if I was going to insert a table, I would actually do it 3 by, let's see, how many do I have there? 4. So I'd actually do a 3 by 4 table. So when I do that, it actually puts in 3 columns, 4 rows, and I'm able to put in my merge field. So within any of these tables, any of the fields that you want to print a certain, to look a certain way, layout is going to be your friend. That's where you're going to work with these tables. So obviously I had these set to align center left. these I have set to align center right. So again, within your layout, this is where it's really going to give you that functionality. Within, again, the bill to, ship to, again, that I hit Shift Enter, that is going to, again, make this information up here a little bit tighter for me. Again, I'm going to be able to format any of my headers. So this one I want to align center left. This one is obviously center left. This one is dead on center. Again, dead on center. You kind of get the gist of how you're working with these. Now, also another thing that I do to kind of tighten this information up is that I will come in, I will go to my table properties, and on my rows, I like to specify a specific height. This is going to, again, make this appear a lot cleaner. So again, I've specified a specific height of 0.3, and my row height is exact. I can also do at least, which is going to put it at 0.3 or higher, but in this case, I'm going to do it as exactly. To get into my footer information, I'm going to go into editing my footer. So notice that I have put in a merged field for my terms. I've also put in a hyperlink that I say that whenever they receive this, please go on here and pay at waltdisneycompany.com. I've put in my billing inquiries, and I've also put in page numbers. So again, I really didn't have to modify this invoice too much because the bulk of it was already in that standardized template that I downloaded from Intacct. Now, once I am done manipulating this particular document, so I'm good with it, I think it looks great, I'm going to save it. Again, I'm going to make sure that I save it as a 97/2003 Word document. And once I go back into Intacct, again, this is where I'm going to make sure as far as saving my document as a printed document template. So we're going to walk through this. So under the document template, I'm going to make sure that I select the correct application. So my applications to choose from, again, where can those printed documents be used? Order entry, purchase orders, accounts receivable, inventory control. What type of template is it? Again, where can we use those? Order, invoice, statement, quote, list, adjustment, or other. So within Sage Intacct, I'm going to come back out here to Platform Services. Again, under my printed document templates. And what I can do is I can add one. And again, I'm going to give it a name. This again is where I'm going to make sure that I select the correct application and the correct template type. And I have already done so. So under my example invoices, let's look at this. So I've named it. This is going to be my default template. I've selected order entry, and I have selected invoice. I can choose my file, and I'm going to select that document that I just created and saved. And once that is there, then at the very bottom, you're then going to see your sample invoice or the invoice for your company. Again, notice the side of these have edit functionality. Again, the out-of-the-box ones from Intacct do not, but yours, obviously, you can edit. Another thing to notate within the edit functionality, you're going to see these setup field preferences. All right, what does that setup field preference look like? Your setup field preferences is going to be, this is where you are going to work with those individual lines. So you're going to set your preferences so you can see multiple items per page. So this is where you're going to be able to select for grouping. You're also going to select it to force it to where it always displays it. You can also set it to be detailed or summarized. And a lot of times with this, I find it to be a functionality of trial and error, because sometimes I do want it to be, detailed, and I do want it to be, I'll make this larger so you guys can see it, because I know that's probably small. So a lot of times too, like I'll say, okay, I want it to group by item ID, and I always want it to display my item ID. A lot of times I will save this, and then I'll go back and rerun it just to make sure that it looks like exactly what I want it to look like. So again, it is kind of a little bit of trial and error, but you can group by these various items. So this kind of explains a little bit as far as the display, the summary value of the groups. So it adds a subtotal for your quantity converted to base unit of measure, subtotal for unit price, subtotal for extended price, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's go back into Intacct. Again, we have recorded these transactions. So let's go back and look at our invoice. So we've created these invoices. We are transacting at the entity level. I have set this as the default under my transaction definition. So within sales invoice, and this has to be done at top level. So within order entry, transaction definitions, sales invoice edit, I have set the printed document template as my example invoice. I've saved it. So now I'm going to print this and see what it looks like. So again, I can go back out to, I can get to it multiple ways. I can either go into my sales invoice. I can print directly from here. I can go in and view it and print. So now let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to print it. And I'm going to say okay. So now, because I have recorded this transaction under Entity 40, it provided the correct logo. There's the date of my invoice number, customer ID, payment due date, bill to and ship to. Notice how clean this is, that there's not a ton of space between my address. Here's my item. I've also set the formatting of my numbers to have the $ as well as commas. And I've created my subtotals. It has my term. It also has my hyperlink if I want them to pay online. And it has my page numbers. Now there's one thing on here that I want you guys to kind of take a look at. So if you were looking at this visually, you said, wow, this looks good. This is exactly what I need. But you look down here and you're like, well, that looks kind of bad. My subtotals are in all caps. My sales tax is in all lowercase, and then my total's in all caps. It just, visually, it just doesn't look good. So where can I change that? So I go back into my transaction definitions under order entry. I go back into my sales invoice. And within my subtotal section, notice right here, it's in all lowercase. I don't want that. I want it to be in all uppercase. So I'm going to save it. So now if I come back out here, I'll close out of this. So now if I come back in here and I print, it still didn't update. Hold on, I'm going to edit and post. There we go. Nice and clean. So anytime you do change that within, or if you are in order entry and you do change that within the transaction definitions, you will just have to edit and repost that invoice for it to basically accept that right there to make it all caps. So let's go into another environment, or not another environment, but another legal entity. So now let's go into our California one. So within order entry, I'm going to come out here to my sales invoice. And now I'm going to print my first sales invoice here. Print. Notice that now I'm transacting in a different legal entity. My logo changed. I don't have to come in and update that. Also notice that my sales tax is still in lowercase. What I can do is I can edit that. I'm not changing anything. So all I do is repost it. And now if I print, nice and clean. So lastly, let's look at this last entity. And look at 20 Main. Order entry. Sales invoice. So this one, we already know we're going to have to edit and post it because it's not going to accept those changes that we put to capitalize our sales tax. So we're going to go ahead and edit and post it. We're going to print it. And again, this is our third legal entity. And it's also accepted our third logo. So it just gives a lot of flexibility in terms of not having to change that logo over and over and over again. Now we talked about also as far as overriding printed document templates. So if right now I'm just going to go from top level. I'm going to go into order entry under all. And I'm going to print or email documents. Now from here, I'm going to come down. Because I've already generated those invoices before, Intacct thinks that I've already sent them out. So I'm going to select previously sent. And I'm actually going to do, let's see, I'm just going to do from December 2nd through December 4th. I'm going to leave it wide open for my customers. For my transaction type, I'm going to select those sales invoices. Notice here that if I needed to, if I had multiple printed document templates, I can come out here. Notice that all of these are the sample ones, but it also has my customized ones in it as well. So there's my example invoice. So if I already had it set within the transaction definition, but I said, no, I want to set the default for the transaction definition as a standardized invoice. There are some times I need a different version of this printed document. I can override it, and when I override it, it's going to overwrite with the new one. So now I'm going to hit View. And I probably need to be at the entity level. It's probably still going to want me to be at that entity level. Yes, I still want me to be at that entity level. All right, so let's go back into, we'll go back into one of our legal entities here. Previously sent. We'll just leave it as current month. Sales invoice and view. All right, so now there is my invoice that I created. I can select print. I can print it and view it that way as well. So again, multiple ways to get to the exact same information, and multiple ways for you to, again, create multiple types of invoices that you can then default and select. So we were talking about that really this has to do more so with a learning curve in terms of Microsoft Word versus Intacct. To me, inserting those merged fields is not as difficult as formatting. So a lot of times, I literally will have to come out to Google and look up merged field formatting. One really good option is this format, this website right here that has some really, really, really good formatting capabilities. So again, it's not so much in terms of working with the merge fields. That might help if I tell you guys how to get to those merge fields, right? So under our, go up more. Come on. Here we go. All right. I'm going to log in. Sometimes I get into my routine of my presentation. I'm like, wow, I didn't even show you guys how to insert those. So I'm logging in with my credentials. I need to get my company ID. Oh, of course, it's correct. Oh, let me get in. All right, so let me log into a different one. really matter here. Ah, I'm having all kinds of trouble logging in. All right, I wanted to be able to show you guys how to get into this. So let me look at this one quick time. All right, let's go back in. Log in. There we go, third time's the charm. All right, so once you log in, you are going to be able to insert these merged fields. So let's log in, you're already logged in. All right, come on, insert my merged fields. Oh my goodness gracious. Not understand why it was grayed out. You know, guys, if I was doing this, if you all were on the phone, I wouldn't be having any problems with this. Isn't that always the case? All right, let's see if I should be able to also do it from this environment as well. Let's get that bar to go up. We can do it from this one as well. And worst case scenario, we'll log out and log back in. That's always a good option too. We'll just close out of we'll actually Word altogether and just start from scratch. All right, let's launch Word. We're going to open up that sample invoice that we created. We are going to log in once more. Go to our add-ins and log in. See, sometimes it just helps to open up or to close out Word and open it up again. All right, so now we can actually look at these merged fields. All right, so under our select applications, notice that we have company, accounts receivable, order entry, purchasing, and inventory control. So again, those same areas that we discussed earlier. So in this case, we are looking at order entry, and we're specifically looking at a sales invoice. Now, this is what is going to give us these merged fields for us to put back into our document. I can sort it. I can sort it by label. It's going to put them in alphabetical order. So I can come down through here and search for, excuse me, say I'm searching for date. I can come down here. Notice here is my date created, my date due. I can also sort by the merge field. So notice earlier that I stated that you needed to know the difference between your headers and your entry level. Obviously, this information in this particular table up here is coming from our header information. So again, if we were looking at back to our invoice, so again, if we're at that Florida, go back into order entry within our sales invoice, and we view this. So this information is coming from our header section. So again, the date, the customer, the terms, when it is due, that all of that information is coming from the header section of our invoice. All of the information below, this is all of our entry level. So again, we are looking at all of the entry information in terms of our items, our item description, the unit, the price, the extended price, all of that information is coming from down below. Then lastly, obviously, our subtotal section is pulling from the information down here. So one thing to note when you are working with your template, and again, we said header information need to go up top, entry level information in the middle section, subtotals at the bottom. When you're working with those merge fields that you are inserting, and I sort by the merged fields, it's going to group them together. So now all of my entry information is located together right here. So now I know that this particular label or this particular field is pulling from the entry section of my invoice. Once I select it, so if I wanted to insert something, I'm going to get down to kind of the bottom so I don't really mess up my invoice or anything. So we're just going to put it right here for demonstration purposes. I'm going to insert that field. So any of my information that I'm wanting to put in, we'll say it's created from, all I do is hit insert. I'll move this out of the way. Then it's going to insert that merge field down here into this document. So for me, for the most part, like I said, I generally don't have, it's usually not so much in terms of finding the information, because especially if I start with one of my sample invoices, so even if I start with a sample invoice that's been downloaded out of Intacct, a lot of my merge fields are already in there. It really has to do more so with just getting in and formatting Microsoft Word. So like I said, if you have to, one good thing to do would be to Google it. And again, we can even look at this particular website together. And there's all kinds of formatting within this website. I use this website a lot, actually, because there's so much of it that it's just, again, learning to manipulate and change those, that formatting within those merged fields. All right. Well, Sarah, I think we're at the end of our presentation. So do we have any other outstanding questions?
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Shay. That was a great overview and great information. We do have a few questions. The first one,
Sure.
Someone asked about if there's some kind of helpful sheet that will show them where to go to get downloads that they need to install.
I don't know necessarily if there's an overall sheet within Intacct for the downloads. In terms of for the mail merge documents, really the only download you're really needing to download would, again, just be under Platform Services, printed document templates and the download for the printed document template toolbar. I'm not aware of any other downloads that are available that sit within Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel.
Okay. Okay. And then the second question was, I think this was when you were making the invoices. She said, can you make the field that the hyperlink is in wider so it's not wrapped?
Yes. Yes. So down in the hyperlink, so this was in our insert, this was in our footer. So we're going to edit our footer. So within this, I am able, obviously this is centered. So what I could do is come up here and it's going to do that. And it may be the way I have this formatted. Should be able to, let's see if we can do this here. Well, I'd have to work with it, but it's just formatting within Word. All of this information is centered. I'm trying to, I don't have a table down here, but again, it's just working within the, working within the settings within Microsoft Word.
All right. And then someone asked, would you be able to use the created field as you did for the phone numbers for the logo selection at the top level?
Yes. So I had another client that did that. And what they did, so this is going to be a completely different sidebar that is, this is going to be even more in depth, but so you guys get a bonus today. So I'm going to create, at the top level, I'm going to create a custom field. So in that custom field, I am going to add, it's going to be within order entry transaction. And I'm going to put it on the sales invoice. If you've never created custom fields, like I said, you're getting a bonus today. All right, I'm going to have it as, I can put it as multiple things. So I can put it as a select or a drop-down menu, but then I'm always going to have to maintain it with my entities if I add more entities. So right now, I'm just going to create it as a text. I'm going to say next. It is going to be entity ID. I'm going to leave it as, let's see, we'll make it safe and just do it as 4 characters. So entity ID on header of order entry sales invoice. I always make my description very, very clear as to what I'm doing. I'm going to say it's required, because if I don't state that it's required, then people could leave it as, they could not enter it. And I'm going to put it in the header section, and I'm going to say save. Now, if I come out here and I'm within, we'll go back into one of our entities. it wouldn't really matter because if I entered it in at the top level, I'm still going to see the same top functionality. So if I'm creating a sales invoice now, notice here that I now have entity ID. And this is, because of this little red asterisk, it's required. So now it's going to force me. So if I was transacting at top level and I was in order entry, again, sales invoice, so it doesn't really matter where I'm at. It's going to force me to put in an entity ID. So whether I'm transacting at 40, 30, or 20, I enter in my sales invoices. Now, what I would then need to do is we'll go back into the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to locate that slide. I'm going to show you what this is going to look like. All right, so now, very similar to this, I'm going to create an if-then statement. And I'm now going to say, if that new custom field that I created, okay, so it's that new entity ID, and on a sidebar, these custom fields will also be in that insert mail merge document or insert merge field. So you're going to see that custom field that you've created. So I would say if that custom field equals 40, same type functionality. I can do the same thing with the logos as well. And I'll even show you. A lot of times if I'm doing a if-then statement, I like to pull it up in a blank document so I don't hurt anything that I've created here. So I'm going to pull in. Let's get out of that. I think I'm still in my footer. All right. So I always like to, I'm a big proponent of, if I have any type of formula that's already written, I'm going to pull it into another document to start editing it. So I'm going to say, all right, so now I don't need it to be my entity location. I'm going to delete that out. But now I'm going to say insert. And I should see now. It may not have updated. A lot of times you'll have to, if you add a custom field when you're in the middle of doing this, sometimes it won't pull in. Sometimes you have to log out and log back in. Let's see if it'll do it. Custom. Yeah, I'm not seeing it right now. It's probably because I'm not logged out and logged back in. But what I would say is if the merge field for my custom field that I created under platform services. So if I said that custom field, the entity ID, if it equals 40, then print this logo. If that merged field for that custom field for the entity ID equals 30, then print this. If again the merge field for the custom field that we just created equals 20, then do this. So yes, you can definitely do that. So again, what you would have to do, so just to kind of recap that, is within Sage Intacct, you would need to create a custom field. Once you create that custom field, it will be available within your insert field IDs. Like I said, this one's not appearing because oftentimes you do have to log out and log back in order to see it. Then you're going to be able to pull that into your if-then statement. And so again, it's going to be, because this information here is, again, it's pulling from that header functionality because it's at the top of our invoice. Then you can state that if you're entering in 40, it's going to print your various logos, whichever entity you're transacting in. So I know that was a very, that was definitely a sidebar, and that was definitely a lengthy explanation, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. That was a nice added bonus to your presentation.
Yes.
That is all the questions that I see, but if anyone has any questions that pop up, please just reach out to us. The best way to reach out would be info@lbmctech.com. I know we covered a lot today, and we'll be sending out the recording and the slides, as well as a survey for the presentation. We'd love to hear your feedback. But thanks again for joining today's presentation. We hope you have a great day, and thanks again, Shay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to be a part of the presentation.